Greetings, SJFO212 here, and today I wanted to give a little status update. I know I haven't posted in a little bit, or upload anything really. That's because I got a new job, so I've been working pretty hard at that for about the past month or so. And I'm also working on moving out and trying to get a hold of my own place and get everything set up there. So it may be just a little while longer, but hopefully once I get done with that, I can keep back going and making regular content. So thanks for those that stick with me, and uh, let's get it started, I guess. So this is a thread that I've been following recently. It's called Let's Get Some Buffs Going. It's created by the Ubermedic 786, and I wanted to kind of bring my thoughts on this across. So I'm going to go through what he says and kind of, let's see, just kind of give my opinions on everything, because what he says here, nerfs, best way to kill a game, and buffs, best way to bring life back to a near-death gun, keep the community happy, I couldn't agree more. I'm frankly tired of nerfing things. It doesn't make it fun. Making things less fun, making things less usable, it's it ruins the fun for everybody. So I would instead say, you know, make other guns usable, because every weapon, my stance on this is every weapon, when stock, should be able to be used without any badges, without any mods, and be able to be picked up and used to a certain degree of effectiveness. Uh, a couple of my big things here is well, an example of this is the MG42. It's impossible to use the thing without tight grip. It does not go where you are aiming anymore. And it's become badge dependent, and badge dependent weapons are not a good thing, because it makes you have to sacrifice things. And that's not something I don't want to have to sit there and sacrifice something because, oh, but you have to have this in order to make the weapon even usable. And they have this on weapons on all factions. The M2 carbine, the Ptrd got hit with the RNG bullets, so uh, the PPSH, and then the MG42, and that's it. Just doesn't make things fun. So I'd go for buffs, and again, this is coming from my point of view, that all weapons should be usable if I grab one off the ground stock, and I have a character with no badges. Because a specialized character with badges, kind of going off on a tangent here, but a specialized character with badges, it is what makes a weapon really good on soldier. I.e., if you have a guy with a light machine gun, and you are running tight grip on that guy with a light machine gun, you are going to do better for most of the time than if you were to run no badges. Well, all the time you're going to do better if you run no badges, and you're going to do better most of the time against other badge combinations. But anyway, let's get down to the nitty-gritty of this and see what the Ubermedic 786 has written. He starts off with going with the STG-44. As in one of my other videos, I proved that the STG, as of 1.07, does not 3-hit kill heavyset silver. The needed buffs, he says, to increase max rate of fire to 630, can be done with the introduction of a new trigger, kind of like what happened with the fast trigger on the FG42. Buff damage to 40 up to 80 meters, can be done with a new barrel spring that reduces rate of fire for more damage, roughly half the range of the AVS, but still more than the M2 carbine. 40 damage is 3-hit kill heavyset gold. And I would probably like to see it done as like a heavy bolt option, because then you can't just go max rate of fire with the barrel and then just go to town. I mean, it would also allow people who want to mod for a slower and more accurate thing, especially with these other options that he has here. It would allow people that want to have a slower and more accurate gun that does more damage, or a faster gun that is good for putting rounds down range. Let's see. ZF41 scope option, which is a 1.5 scope. I know it was never historically used for it, but it would be nice as an option, since in my opinion 4x is too high for this type of gun. I mean, I'm of the idea that all scopes for all infantry weapons need to be 2.2. Because then it allows you to have a reticle and a little bit of extra zoom, but it takes away your peripherals and it makes you reload slower, at least on bolt actions. And that's a fair trade-off, in my opinion, for 2.2, because it gives you just that little bit of extra zoom and it doesn't force you to use it. There are advantages to not using it as well. So I like the idea of a low power scope, especially for the STG, but as for the 1.5, I think it would be easier to go with the 2.2 because the iron sight zoom right now I think is close to 1.5, but not entirely sure. Let's see. He's quoting this guy, RGR911, says remove ganja smoke and flame. And this is a big one. The smoke cloud of the STG is like firing a Revolutionary or Civil War era musket. It obscures your sight quite a bit, and sitting there and making people unable to see is not fun. Sitting there and saying, "Hey, you know what would be a good nerf for the gun? Instead of like giving it more recoil or making it do less damage, no, let's just make you unable to see while using it. That's not a proper way to balance a gun." Heavy spring, seriously, M2 has it, but not this. Yeah, STG needs to get the heavy spring. MG42, simple things. Get rid of RNG recoil. No RNG, never on the gun, and I could have never said it better myself. Like I said earlier, having a gun like the PPSH or the MG42 or the carbine that simply go everywhere, it's not really fun to use because it's not consistent. And consistency is a big thing in this game. That's why I mod my weapons the way I do, because I know how they'll perform consistently. I'll take a consistent weapon over a weapon that goes everywhere. That's why I've always had the MG42 with the heavy spring instead of running it at max rate of fire like so many others did, because I enjoyed consistency. He says use vertical recoil instead, should still kick a fair bit, but not be laser accurate like it used to be. And that'll be fine. With tight grip, you can actually, and learning the recoil, you should be able to, get back to the way it is. A very powerful weapon, but it takes a little bit of skill to master, as does most other guns in the game. FG42, make it available for infantry. Yes. Look, I know I'm gonna get a lot of flack for this, but the FG42, and thus the Johnson as well, because you have to talk about that. Uh, they're not really light machine guns. They're more battle rifles than anything. So I would say put them in their own subclass. And, well, subclass of weapons. We have semi-automatic rifles and assault rifles and bolt actions and SMGs, but they need a battle rifle. Perhaps the bar could go there as well because the bar is different from other light machine guns. I don't know, but I think he gets onto that. But FG42 needs to be made available to infantry, and the Russians need a para-weapon that is also available as well with similar stats. Low magazine size, low equipment points, but if you have good aim, then it can kill. M2 Carbine. Two ways to mod this: high rate of fire PPSH like weapon or a PDW in between SMG and AR. I'm reading this, the high rate of fire PPSH like weapon, as a more of, let's see, how would I put this? With the trigger and the light and spring, or just the trigger, which is a great submachine gun replacement. And it is wonderful if you have tight grip at the current time. One thing I would add to this is that you also need to do the same thing with the MG42. RNG recoil is not fun. Get rid of it. Have more vertical recoil instead. PDW, in between SMG and AR. I find this mostly useful when I'm running the trigger and heavy spring. It reduces recoil, reduces rate of fire slightly, but it's still useful, and it puts its effective range out there quite a bit. Buff damage to 30 stock, done with the new barrel, the weighted barrel, which reduces rate of fire to 550, max rate of fire to 750, range buff to 60 meters, more stable, makes the recoil vertical and more predictable. This is what I'm talking about. Jackal ammo with weighted barrel brings damage at 36, which can 3-hit kill heavyset bronze, same as the current STG. With the max rate of fire 750, I could see that working. I really could. Where you could either have people who like to run it as a PDW, or like to run it as kind of a tier 3 SMG, or those who will run it as a mid-range weapon with the slow rate of fire. Let's see. M1 carbine should be available to infantry, and then he just linked Broski Bros thread, and now I have my ups and downs with Broski Bros thread, but that's for another day. But let's see, available to infantry. Uh, it just needs a rework on the entire thing, but I'll get into that at a later date, maybe. Moving on, AVS. He says we'll need some love because these buffs would threaten its place in the game. New spring, the DMR spring, lowers rate of fire with Ura barrel should lower to 480 to increase damage to 45. This will be let's see, sniper ammo plus DNR spring should bring the damage to 50. 2-hit kill to non-heavy set. He's quoting this as balanced because the JMG, the Johnson machine gun, and the 1919 can do this while having a larger magazine or less equipment points, while shooting faster. AVS actually viable in 2-hit kill mode. Might as well. I mean, I'll still stick with what I run, but I could see this actually, being relatively useful with the scope and semi-auto, and it it might make sense. Might be fun. Let's see. Heavy spring out of all the elite infantry weapons. Why does the M2 get it, but not this? Makes no bloody sense. Yeah, all the elite infantry weapons need the heavy spring. The STG and the AVS not having it has always been kind of silly to me. Let's see. PTRD, get rid of the RNG bullets, is basically what he's saying. Whenever they nerf the PTRD, they increased the sway, yes. But they also added RNG bullets, i.e., if you are aiming at something, even if you aim at it with that increased sway and have it dead center, the bullet will still miss sometimes and go out at like a 10-degree angle to the end of your gun, which is silly. The weapon is over 6 feet long. It should be able to shoot straight. I've had times where I've missed tanks and cars at very close ranges because of just the inaccuracy. Adding the extra sway was enough, because before, people were just using it like oversized sniper rifles. And now, with the extra sway, if you can manage to get the sight on target and hold target, you should be able to hit it. You need to be rewarded for managing that sway. Completely stable when prone, that of course would go with bipods, but until bipods are properly introduced, I suppose that would be a thing to do. PTRD also needs some counters, which are the Panzerbuch 39 and the M18 recoilless rifle with the boys anti-tank rifle. The Panzerbuch, let's see, identical to the PTRD as far as I know. M18 recoilless rifle, it is closer to a bazooka than an anti-tank rifle. So I would really toss this out, especially with them talking about a 2.8 scope. The boys anti-tank rifle, 5-round magazine, I could understand that, but have an extremely long reload time and a very long delay between shots. That would make it so that it would be actually doable. Ideally, it would have, well, it would probably have one magazine in, which is 5 rounds, and then extra in reserve, which would give you 10 with 1 pouch of ammunition. With 2 pouches, you would get 15, which would be a little less than a PTRD slash Panzerbuch, but I suppose that it going in magazine form would kind of it would kind of make it even, I think. It would have, the ability to fire more than one shot without reloading, but have less ammo overall. And would still have a relatively low fire rate. That's the only way I could see this thing being balanced. Or if we're feeling risky, he then goes on to describe the Winchester anti-tank rifle, which is basically a Garand that's firing 50 BMG. Or, we could actually use the 50 caliber that we have in game, but I personally would go with the boys anti-tank rifle. Alright, DT-29 for infantry. I think this is actually a thing. If you have the proper command, you can spawn it in. If, the server has console commands enabled, which most of the time the prototype server might. Uh, but you spawn it in, and it's the same model that they have on the T20 and the BA-64B, which is the vehicle mounted gun, and it bugs out when it's in infantry hands, and you can't really use it. However, I always wanted to know, why don't we just have this for infantry? So, DT-29, damage 37, 30 at lowest, 100 meters until damage drop off, fully dropped off at 500, 600 RPM with a 60 round magazine, and a 6.0 reload speed. Armor piercing rounds is default. I think we should still stick with stock because he talks later on about how the armor piercing rounds by default would be because of you just ripped it straight off a vehicle, but I think it should just have the stock rounds, and then you could lower the damage a little bit, and then you could put the armor piercing rounds on and really go to town. Uh, and then he talks about the Fedorov, Avdomat, and honestly, I actually saw a video the other day. I realized that technically the Fedorov wasn't really used in World War II, but only in the Winter War. Uh, but it was talking about the weapons in Battlefield 1, because Battlefield 1 has a lot of prototypes in there. Uh, and it's gotten to me that while, yes, I would like to have historical weapons over, prototype weapons, I value balance more than having complete historical accuracy. If the weapon was designed and looks good during the time and looks like it could have been used during the time, then as long as it is for balance, then I see no reason why you shouldn't add it. Thus, I'm gonna go with sure, let the Fedorov Automat be included into the game. This would also probably go along in the battle rifle category with the Johnson and the FG-42, so they could be available for infantry as well. Damage 35, 30 at lowest, which means it's a 3-hit kill to heavy set bronze. 75 meters until drop off, fully dropped off at 150. This damage, by the way, 35, that is the lowest of the 3 battle rifles if we're talking Fedorov, FG-42, and Johnson. FG-42 has, I think, 37 stock, and then the Johnson has 38 stock. 450 RPM, which means it would be pretty freaking slow. I don't know. I might actually bump that up to 500 or something for the Fedorov, just as stock, just so it can compete. Because the FG, I think, is 500 stock as well, while the Johnson is, what was it? Oh, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's close to 600 since they changed all the values again. 25 rounds in the magazine, and then a faster reload at 3.5 seconds with the scope mountable, and then 6 equipment points. And that seems fair to me. I mean, you have a lower RPM and a lower damage per round. However, 75-meter range is actually pretty nice for the battle rifles, because the Johnson and the FG-42 have relatively low range before damage drop off, and then it drops off quite steeply. So having something that doesn't do as much damage, but has more bullets, fires a little bit slower, and has much more range, that might be, asymmetrical balance. That sounds like good asymmetrical balance, to me at least. Of course, anyone can be free to, discuss and present stuff otherwise. The idea of these weapons are that they fill the void in weapons that Soviets need with range and accuracy over straight firepower against their competition, which is what I was saying earlier. DT-29 will be able to shoot further and for longer while maintaining its damage in the 1919 or MG-42. Won't shoot as fast or do as much damage, but it'll put more people down per magazine, be more efficient with each bullet, if you can aim. The reason the change from the DP-28 to the DT-29 is the extra range and the larger magazine. I am just stuttering everywhere. The idea of it having AP rounds as default is from infantry taking off the vehicle which had AP rounds on it. It will keep the 3-hit kill for longer distance and 4-hit kill enemies at the furthest, which no other LMG can do without heavy set. Should be easiest to add in as the model is already endgame. Like I said, I think I discussed this above as I talked about the armor piercing rounds as default. I'd probably just keep it with, what we have here as stock. Fedorov Avtomat won't do as much damage or shoot as fast as the Johnson or the FG-42, but it has an extra 5 bullets per magazine while being super stable even with the scope added. It will be the long-range battle rifle of the trio, being able to hit targets further away while maintaining its damage. It will be the only battle rifle to maintain a 3-hit kill at range. Uh, let's see. Recon changes. Add a hold breath option to reduce sway. Now, this is not necessarily my best thing because I've been shooting for about the past decade. I have a lot of experience, and then especially at range, and from talking to people that are marksmen and have training, and from my own experience, holding your breath, and I hate that they put this in games. I'm about to go off on a major tangent here, but I hate that they add a hold breath thing because suddenly you hold your breath and everything begins. Every rifle becomes a laser. Honestly, if you're trying to steady something, it's more about having a good grip and, you're having to have something to rest against, whether it be a bipod or just leading the rifle on an inanimate object. But the holding the breath that you're talking about is not a good thing because whenever you hold your breath, you're limiting your respiration. And limiting your respiration means that you're also limiting the amount of blood flow and the amount of oxygen that you're getting to your brain. If you hold your breath for too long, you pass out. If you go swimming and you don't breathe for a long time, you pass out. Because that's in whenever you're shooting, if you hold your breath for a really long time, you start to lose focus. And you lose focus, and then you're more likely to miss your shot. So holding breath, not my favorite thing. Which he then goes on with say, or just improve the current sway, which is what I would personally go for. Recon should have less sway by default, simply because they're supposed to be trained. We haven't been drinking a ton of vodka to have this much sway with the 8 times. Maybe add a new barrel spring to get past heavyset gold in one shot. It would not really be the best thing because heavyset versus OHK is a big issue of balance. It is a very fragile balance, and to break that fragile balance is not a good idea for the most part. Uh, so I would have to say no to the heavyset gold one shot. Uh, let's see. Remove the minus 25% damage thing with recon vehicles. I agree with that. BA6 has the same cannon as the T26. Greyhound has the same cannon as the Stuart, and then the Triple Two has the same cannon as the Lukes. You need to give them the same damage. It would actually make them very much usable and actual threats against light and medium tanks. Let's see. T1 Scout Car for US and GE, which is the STKFC 221, which he says is the MG34 mounted with armor piercing, and the M20 Scout Car, which is the M20 Browning with armor piercing. And I haven't really looked at these, but at the moment, having Tier 1 Scout cars for the other factions would be nice as well. And to have them kind of like the BA-64B with just the machine gun turret, it's a good idea. And then he talks about adding a Tier 3 Scout car, heavily armored Scout cars. BA-11, which will need some of that Rito logic. The T-18E2 Boarhound, which I haven't really ever looked into. And then the SDKFC 234-2 Puma, which I have looked at, and that would be quite fun. I think it would be something that would make things a lot more interesting. I don't know if you would really change the mechanized recon up that much, or just allow them to equip whatever, because then I'm thinking, what happens if you have just your basic BA-64B against a Puma that has a 50mm cannon? But I digress. I think it would be interesting nonetheless. Let's see. He goes on, final paragraph to say, put the AVS, STG, and M2 carbines under the elite infantry weapon category officially instead of rifles, and lower their cost per shot to be cheaper than LMGs. Yes. Please. Seriously, elite infantry weapons with scopes cost a fortune to run, and some of them even without scopes cost a fortune to run. I think the STG is, almost 7 credits a shot with the scope, and only 4. But really, 4 credits a shot. One magazine is going to cost you 120 credits, and that's way too much. But yeah, they need to have their repair cost decreased, and need to be in their own separate weapons so we can fiddle with them, and you can't just sit there and stick them in the same category as semi-automatic rifles. And then he goes on with what I said before. Also put the Johnson machine gun, the FG-42, and the Fedorov automat under the battle rifle category instead of the LMG category, so they can be fine-tuned instead of having the same effects as other LMGs. Uh, Put these in place and adjust when necessary if something is deemed too OP. If everything is OP and nothing is OP. And that is, let's see, it was last edited June 7th, but that is it for this thread. And as you can see, I have given it reputation. Because for the most part, for the vast majority, I really like these changes. Or at least the idea behind these changes. Of course, if they were all implemented at once, it would make things a bit difficult to balance, but I'm sure that if they were all implemented, then everyone would be able to have fun no matter what weapon you have, because nerfing is not fun. So anyway, that was the Let's Get Some Buffs Going thread. I will leave a link to it in the description, of course. And this is SGF0212 signing off. Thank you for watching.